Merel van de Vaart is city history curator at the Stedelijk Museum Schiedam in the city. And over the past 10 years, she's worked with a number of museums across Europe on projects that build bridges between collections and people, and particularly using digital tools. And we're very lucky to have her here today, and she's going to tell us a little bit about herself and what her experience is with the use of digital media in the museum.
Yes, so I started a couple of years back, quite a few years back, kind of working with museums and visitors and kind of getting really interested in digital because that was a tool in our toolbox that we didn't really know how to use that well yet. So a lot of museums were introducing technology on gallery, but really kind of understanding what it did to the visitor experience and how we could best utilize it was still kind of unknown for a lot of organizations. So I did research into that interaction between visitors, museum objects, and technology, and particularly how technology can help visitors kind of also engage with the objects. What you see when we look at the use of technology in museums, how it was often first introduced was one, either to explain something that people found really hard to explain through objects, so explaining more abstract theories, for example, or gamifying that information for people because an object couldn't really convey that information, or by just adding lots of extra text and information to an object because the text labels have to be short. We all know that, and for some reason we think that when we put it on a screen, all of a sudden people read a lot more text than if it's on a text label, which now we've come to realize, of course, is not the case. And so that's what I did a lot of research on. I've also worked with museums who want to experiment with using kind of online tools and particularly social media, seeing how they can use it not just as a marketing tool, but as a tool to more kind of genuinely connect with people who are interested in topics that that museum represents or talks about. And now as a city history curator, I think my screen froze. Did it?
No, it's back.
No, I'm back. Okay, cool. A city history curator, I'm really focusing on the objects, getting to know the collection, but also thinking about how we can introduce technology in this museum, which we rarely use other than maybe a digital sound file. We don't really have digital installations in this museum. And as a museum, we are of, by, and for all and for our community. So what does it mean for us to kind of use digital or be online in that context of being there for people, but also often by the people that are in this city? So there's lots of layers to kind of how I engage with digital and use digital in my work and in my research.
Thank you. According to you, what does the digital bring to storytelling in the museum?
Oh, well, it can bring lots of different things. And I think that that's a question we're still continuously answering as well. So I think when you look at our use online or our presence online, digital can really help us kind of rethink what it means to have a Twitter account or an Instagram account or a website, and how we can tell these stories in an environment online that's really saturated with lots of news and facts, but also lots of niche subjects that people can find and gather around. So subject enthusiasts can really kind of thrive on the internet, and as a museum we can facilitate that and tell stories that are, kind of interesting, piques curiosity for lots of different people. And on gallery, I think it can help us create more immersive or more diverse audience experiences, because lots of different people, and we come to understand this more and more in museums, lots of different people want and need and are interested in lots of different things and lots of different ways of engaging with your institution. And digital can be a tool for that as well. And I think when it comes to on gallery, what's really interesting for me personally is how we balance the information and the knowledge we have with the information and the knowledge our visitors bring or other people bring to our institutions, and how we can facilitate kind of almost a story making, story creating experience for our visitors, where they actually decide what content to engage with and what not, and how do we help them make a comprehensive story of their visit, rather than just assuming that they will follow all the information and just our narrative. They will create their own narrative, and how can we facilitate that?
Okay, I see. And you've been working a lot on the way digital installation influence visitors' engagement with the physical objects on display. What would you say are the main impacts of digital installation or storytelling on the visitors, on the audiences?
Well, I think just like people have certain expectations of a museum, so they expect to encounter certain things, they expect themselves and people around them to behave in a certain way. People also have very strong expectations and patterns around technology. And so, for example, what we found in the Allard Pearson, a museum that I worked at that has an archaeology collection, was that a lot of the visitors were kind of over 60. They were not necessarily afraid of technology, but they did, just like everybody, have a very specific expectation of it. So when we gave people a tablet or a smartphone, or if we would offer that on gallery, a lot of our visitors would say, oh, that's for the young people. That's probably, it's a screen or it's a tablet, so that's probably they do for young people. So that content is not for me. So they would not engage. Or they would say, oh, I have an iPad as well at home. And they would start using the iPad as they would at home. But actually, this was a different context, and we didn't need them to push a button, for example, but they just had to point it at something, and we used image recognition. So they're very strong patterns of expectation.
You've cut a bit. Can you repeat? Can you repeat what you were just saying about what they ended up doing with the iPad?
Well, if they thought that this is what I have at home, they would use it the same way they would use their own tablet. So they, if they knew like, oh, we have to press the home button first, they would start by doing that. Like they would pick up the tablet and they would press that big button in the middle. When actually that wasn't necessarily because the app was open and we required different interaction from them, but they just had expectations. And what we realized was if we would kind of hide the technology, so not focus on the technology. So for example, instead of giving people a smartphone, we would give them something that looked like a magnifying glass, and inside there was a smartphone. So the technology of the smartphone was there and we used it, but it didn't trigger those standard patterns of behavior because it didn't look like a smartphone. It looked like a magnifying glass. So they would use it as a magnifying glass, and that was actually the behavior we wanted them to use. We wanted them to look at objects. It had image recognition in it. So if they would point it at an object, the phone would recognize the object and provide information about it. And with a magnifying glass, that was a kind of natural thing to do for people. Yeah. But with a phone, they would engage with the phone and not with what was beyond that screen.
Well, that's super interesting. And so have you seen any excellent use of digital installation beyond the screen for museum storytelling?
Well, we've experimented a little bit with ourselves. I think there are lots of different ways. So a very interesting example actually is not so much in a museum, but is what Disneyland has introduced, which is a bracelet that they send to people after they buy the ticket. So you get it at home. They fully acknowledge like your journey starts after purchasing the ticket, starts at home. They send this bracelet, and not all visitors get it, but if you pay a certain amount, and that bracelet basically tracks you and introduces you, which means that even when you get off the plane, your suitcases are brought to your hotel room from the plane because of your bracelet, and they know exactly who you are. So you're on the shuttle bus, you're brought to your hotel. The moment you get into the hotel, they say, oh, welcome. Emily, nice to see you, because the bracelet kind of tells the people at the front desk on their computer, like, it's Emily checking in with her. So many children, and this is what they're interested in, or they're vegetarian, or so they know everything about you. So when you go to the restaurant, you can kind of take a seat at the table and your food will come without having to order it first. So it's really kind of taking away a lot of the bumps in the journey where you have to be transactional.
Yeah.
And they take that away, and you engage with screens as well. But it also can tell you, for example, let's plan ahead for today, what attractions you want to see, and which ones are busy at which time, and we can help you navigate so you don't have to queue so much, so that it can really help people kind of smooth their journey.
And do you think that personalizes the experience? And do you think how do you see it transferred into a museum environment?
I think museums can learn from the approach of like what makes it easier for people to engage with us. So, for example, automatically providing text labels in somebody's native tongue can be brilliant.
That
can
helps.
be great, and it's not super flashy. It's not a flashy use of technology, or making it really easy for people, for wherever they are, to find a bathroom. Or to unlock content that's suitable for families with young children. And I think that's something that we can learn a lot from. The rollout of such extensive technology is hugely expensive, and for museums that would not be feasible, but it can be done but it can also be done on the cheap, a lot more easily than we now think, I think. Something we do have to think about is privacy and ethics. Which in our enthusiasm to embrace technology, we sometimes do not realize how much data we collect about a person, and how that data is actually personal data that we should not be collecting, or that we should be storing safely, or that we should not allow access to for other people. So these are questions that then arise that we also have to think about.
See. And do you think that digital museums can offer a different type of engagement for audiences? Do you think there's space that allows for another type of engagement?
I think if we're brave enough, we can give people a lot more control over their visit, and we can allow a much larger diversity of visits to our organization. And this requires trial and error for us to figure out how that works, but also for our visitors, because, as I say, visitors have preconceived notions of what a museum is, and if a museum is a suitable place for children, or for friends having a nice day out, or if it's a good resource online, or a fun resource online, or if it's something that you can find in different places. I think a challenge for us as well is that as museums, our whole model has been people come to us physically, and now we have websites and social media channels. They come to us online. And it's a really great opportunity for us to kind of be present where people are. And physically, that's often really difficult, but simple things as if you have a social media account, you can follow certain hashtags and engage in conversations about topics that are relevant to your organization, and be present there without telling people, oh, come to follow our Instagram account, because the fun stuff is happening over here with us. Actually, no, we're being present, we're being part of the community, we're reaching out, people can ask us questions, people be more human in a sense.
Yeah, but that asks for a really big institutional change, I think. And what do you think those institutions need to do to adapt to this new medium? And in what way are they going to change?
I think it varies from organization to organization. I think there can be a lot more diversity. I don't think every museum has to do everything and be there for everyone, but I think they have to maybe be more focused on what it is they do, what it is they're good at, what topics they want to engage with. Do they want to be activists? Do they want to be researchers, encouraging academic research and sharing that to a wider audience? And I think, yes, it needs institutional change, but I think that change is needed anyways, because museums as institutions originated in a time where authority and kind of knowledge presided with institutions, or a very few people who represented those institutions. And that's now not how people view the world anymore anyways. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge that knowledge and expertise exists outside of our institutions, and that we should celebrate that, and that we should enhance the voices that we know are knowledgeable, and that we should create platforms where fake news does not exist. And decade ago, research showed that museums were one of the most trusted places when it came to getting information, more trusted than the news, more trusted than traditional print media. And I think that's somewhere where we can play a role in a digital world.
Absolutely, thank you. And what can you see as the future of digital innovation in the museum? What's your dream? What do you think can happen? How far can we go?
Well, my dream and what I think can happen are not necessarily the same thing. I think what can happen, for example, is that museums continue to be really excited about new technology, and that they think that innovation is doing VR or having holograms, and that's innovation. What I hope and my dream is that museums will review their idea or concept of innovation, and that innovating is a verb, in the sense that it's about what you do, and you have to understand your tools. You have to understand your toolkit can be very modest. But if you know how to use those tools well, and if you really understand what it is they can do, you can do great things with them, and you can innovate and you can experiment. So I hope that that's where museums will go next, that they don't get kind of convinced by companies who come and say, look, we have this new toy, you should use it. But that they say, well, actually, that's interesting, let us have a look. You have to be aware of the changes, but also let us invest in digital skills across the organization, so that everybody understands what an NFC tag is, and that everybody understands, what tracking actually means, or how creating digital content actually works, and what the limitations and the opportunities really are. You don't have to be able to code in order to be better equipped and better versed in technology and understand what the potential is.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was super interesting. And so thank you for your time. And we talk again soon.